Welcome to New World Now, where host Kim Corbin has compelling conversations with authors published by New World Library. They will discuss their personal journeys and share practical tools we can use to be more aware, mindful, and present in our daily lives. Now, here's your host, Kim Corbin.
Though it has definitely improved by leaps and bounds over the past 2 decades, my relationship with my body was anything but positive for the majority of my youth. In fact, despite the positive personality I have always strived to share with the world, behind the scenes, far too often, my body has served as a receptacle for my feelings of negativity, shame, and self-judgment. All of that began to change when I discovered my passion for skipping as an adult 18 years ago and started moving my body on a regular basis in a way that reawakened my felt sense of childlike joy. And while I've definitely come a long way in healing my relationship with my body and recognizing it as the powerful ally and wisdom holder that it is, far too often I still find myself slipping back into old judgmental energetic patterns surrounding my physical form that no longer serve me. And that's where my guest today, Suzanne Scurlock-Durana, comes in. Suzanne is the author of Full Body Presence, Learning to Listen to Your Body's Wisdom, and most recently, Reclaiming Your Body, Healing from Trauma and Awakening to Your Body's Wisdom, which we're going to be discussing today. As one of the world's leading authorities on conscious awareness and its transformational impact on the healing process, Suzanne has been empowering people for over 30 years to experience joy in each moment. Her perspective on the lasting effects of traumatic events on both our bodies and our lives has been a real eye-opener for me, and I've been eagerly anticipating this conversation. So welcome, Suzanne, and thanks for being here.
Thanks, Kim. I'm delighted to be here.
You start Reclaiming Your Body by saying that the body has a language that is older and more primal than most of us realize. And I'd like to start by having you talk just a little bit about the wisdom of our bodies and why it's becoming increasingly important for us to connect with it in today's world.
Well, I would say that the wisdom of the body comes through to us in our felt sense of things, a knowing that we might have and we don't even know where it's coming from. It might come through a thought. It might come through something we hear in the back of our heads, like move away from that or move toward that. There are many, many ways in which the body gives us signals, a tightness in our gut, a warmth in our bellies, an urgency to shift or move in a particular way. All of these things are feeding us all the time, and yet, because of the pace that we go at in the world today, and because of the way that we are becoming more and more reliant on technology that moves us faster and faster and faster, and in a more and more focused way, we are losing the capacity to hear what's being said in that deep wisdom of the body.
Yes. And while the title Reclaiming Your Body immediately resonated with me since it's so in line with my own healing journey, when I first heard the healing from trauma part of the subtitle, I wondered if the book was for me, since at the time I thought that I'd been fortunate enough not to have experienced any seriously traumatic events in my life. Mm-hmm. But it didn't take me long as I read the examples that you share in the book to realize that our bodies are impacted by traumas of all shapes and sizes. Yeah. So would you tell us more about the kinds of trauma that your book can help people heal from?
Oh, gosh. Well, I would say that if we were to start at the beginning and then move all the way through to the things that really, quite honestly, 30 years ago were considered traumatic. So, for instance, being a Vietnam vet and having gone through watching your buddy die and having flashbacks thereafter, being raped, being molested as a child, all of these things, hands down, they were considered trauma. And these are the kinds of things that you or I would say but I managed to escape that. I made it through to adulthood. Or I almost made it through to adulthood without any of those. But the interesting piece is that there are small traumas that go on for us all the time that we are just now really beginning to understand and comprehend can affect how our ability to be present in the moment, to be able to feel the sensations of each moment of our lives, how it pushes us out of the present moment into a state of anxiety, tightening down, dissociating. It can be something that really happens that's very emotional and overwhelming that we then have to suppress because we have to go to work or run a meeting or get things done. It can be watching something helplessly that's traumatizing to other people because we can't do anything about it. The trauma gets locked in the tissue. It's a sense of helplessness that is the confounding factor there. When we have things happen and we're very emotionally charged at the time of it, that can be very, very encapsulating, if you will. So it can be decisions that we made as children to never let anybody get to us again because something felt overwhelming. And honestly, to a 3-year-old, what felt overwhelming might not be a problem today. But we tighten down inside and never quite let go again as we go through our days until we come to the process of healing our own trauma. And the good news is that we can. You know, the research of the last 15 years shows that we do have what we call neuroplasticity. The brain and the body have the capacity to actually let go of trauma under the right circumstances, and we can then move on with our lives in a more present-centered, joyful way.
Yeah. Yes. Well, as I made my way through Reclaiming Your Body, I realized that a traumatic experience from my past that needs my love and attention right now happened when my well-intentioned father made me go to Weight Watchers with him when I was a freshman in high school. Mm-hmm. And the negative beliefs and judgments that I internalized about my body as a result. It was a huge aha moment for me. I never would have thought of that as a trauma, but it makes perfect sense as I do the self-work I'm doing around my body. I'm like, oh my gosh, wow, that's where my rebel comes from. That's where when I start like trying to discipline myself, it acts out. And it's interesting because what my mind has always minimized that. Like we've talked about it and he wanted me to have good skills. He had good intentions. And my mind's like, oh, it's not that big of a deal. But when I tuned in and listened to my body as I read your book, I realized that there is healing that needs to be done that was living at an unconscious level. So would you talk about our tendency as a culture to allow the strength of our minds to bypass our body's vulnerability and wisdom?
Yeah. Well, you have to look at the educational system and our cultural and religious upbringing to really see the roots of it. But we don't live in cultures anymore that are body-centered. We live in cultures that are mentally centered. Our educational system is very left brain, memorize, spit it back out. The arts and sciences in all kinds of sports are getting lost for the average student. The body-centered way that indigenous cultures really operated from is rapidly disappearing. And the pain of that, the pain of really losing our bodies, I am sure is contributing to the addictive culture that we have right now, to the problems that we have. You look at most of the religions in the world and they basically look at the body and say, yeah, nope, you don't want to get close to your body. It's going to be a problem for you if you do that. It's going to be a lure, it's going to be a seduction, it's going to be a problem in some way that will take you off track from being the spiritual perfection that you're supposed to be in your relationship with the divine, whatever that is in your religion. Yeah.
Yeah. And I really appreciate how, a lot of New World Library authors write about being present in the moment from a lot of different angles. And I really appreciate how your work brings the body and physical sensation deeply into this, because it's really kind of where it all starts. And
right.
So will you talk a little bit about how stress and trauma impacts that ability to have full body presence?
Well, it's interesting because stress and trauma, when something is traumatizing to us, our first tendency is to want to limit it and minimize it so that we can continue to function. Or if it's really overwhelming and shocking, the body freezes around it and contracts, or freezes around it and you dissociate. So in either case, it takes you out of the present moment. You're now no longer really able to feel yourself most fully because you're walking around with this numb knob or ball of pain inside, or emptiness or whatever. And so that part, let's say that part is your heart. Now you no longer have access to your heart because you're doing everything you can to not feel that pain in your heart. And so it literally, I say, it locks us out of the present moment. Trauma is not our friend in terms of the ability to be really fully present in our lives. Yeah.
Right. And you say that the more trauma that someone has felt, the more disconnected that they may feel.
Yes.
So why is that? And what does it take for someone who has suffered severe trauma to heal?
Well, what I would say is each time a traumatic moment enters the body will do its best to compartmentalize and encapsulate that traumatic memory, whatever it is, that pain, that numbness, whatever it is, so that we can continue to function. And so what happens then is if you have one traumatic event, and then you have a second traumatic event, and then you have a third traumatic event, and then you have a fourth traumatic event, each one of those events kind of gets locked away in what Dr. Upledger would call an energy cyst. In other words, the body encapsulates it, tightens down around it, and says, we know that you have to operate, you have to survive in the world, so we're gonna clamp down around this area in your heart or in your gut or in your hip or wherever it is so that you can keep functioning. But the problem is that in doing that helps you in the short run, but it's very deleterious in the long run because you lose the capacity to actually feel what's going on in the present moment. And so my whole thrust is, how can I help you get back to the present moment of sensation? How can I help you reclaim the areas of yourself that feel numb, that feel distant, that feel painful, that feel cold, that feel shock, that feel frozen? See, these are the places that are just ripe for healing so that we can reclaim that geography inside ourselves and come back to who we are in a way that enables us to begin to wake up to the joy in our lives, the creativity, the exquisiteness of being alive is there waiting for us. But if we're not in the present moment, it's very hard to receive it.
Right. And you also say that if we disrespect our bodies and second guess their messages, they go mute over time.
Yeah.
So how do we take our bodies off of mute?
Well, number one is to recognize that it's on mute.
Yes.
So there's a little thing I call the BQ in the very front end of the book, or body intelligence quiz, right? 9 questions, 9 simple questions that basically tells you, am I in a friendly relationship to my body, or am I in an unfriendly relationship to my body? Am I feeling abandoned by my body? Am I feeling like I constantly get betrayed by it? Am I totally befuddled by my body? Do I feel like I have to control it and really knuckle down on it all the time in order to be okay? Or do you actually feel as though your body is your friend? And like all friendships, you have to have dialogue and talk when things are working or not working. But basically you feel as though, oh, that's what happened there. Or is it a friendly relationship or an unfriendly relationship? And first you have to recognize I've muted my body because I didn't feel friendly towards it. Or, it is unmuted, but certain circumstances cause me to mute it. Do you understand what I'm saying? Once you are aware of that, then you can change it.
Yes, and that was absolutely what this realization about my, thing from when I was a freshman in high school was for me. It was like, oh, wow. Like I never had thought about it in a body sense and realized. And so just having that awareness is just a powerful path to be able to head down as far as healing goes.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's the first step always, is awareness.
Yeah. And realizing that it's going on. Uh-huh. And what role does nurturing touch play?
Oh, gosh. So one of the things that I see as a craniosacral therapist and a body worker is that nurturing touch is one of the primary ways that people get to feeling a sense of safety in their bodies. And you can sit and speak with someone and feel safe over time by the tone of their voice, by the look of their face, by their attentiveness, by the fact that they're paying close attention to you in a kind way. That gives you a sense of safety. But if you want something to happen that is just so much faster, add nurturing touch to the dynamic. And the body, that primal message in the body goes, oh my God.
Big sigh.
I'm safe. I'm safe. And when you feel safe, the body is then willing to begin to heal what's gone on that doesn't feel safe.
Yes.
Yeah.
Let's let's see. So you have different chapter in the book for 6 different wisdom areas of the body: the heart, the gut, the pelvis, the legs and the feet, our bones and our brains. They're all fascinating. And the chapter about the wisdom of the gut, you say that the wisdom of the gut is a lot more accurate than a worrying mind that tends to ruminate over the same thoughts over and over.
Yep.
So how can we begin to differentiate between when something is a gut knowing and that kind of endless worrying that is kind of can be our default so often?
Old worry. So there's 2 differentiations I want to make. Worry is worrying about something that's old, like a circumstance that happened that's no longer here, but you're afraid it's going to happen again. So the worry is not in the present moment, and you'll have certain thoughts that have judgment to them, and they're punishing thoughts usually, or scary thoughts. And what that does is it sets your brain into fight, flight, freeze. And the minute you set the brain into, oh my God, something bad's going to happen, the whole vagal nerve tract registers down, your gut tightens up, not because there's actually anything scary happening, but because the vagus is saying we're not safe. And then it's a really charged experience. It's a very charged experience when you are worrying about something. And people will say, oh my God, my gut's in a knot. I can't stand it. My chest is tight. I can hardly breathe. Panic attacks, things like that often come from worry. Mm-hmm. Present moment gut knowing is a whole different thing. There's really rarely a big charge to it. There's just a sense of sort of a core level of just a steady level of, oh, something isn't right, or, oh gosh, this is perfect. But there's very little charge to it. And it's a quiet voice. And it tells you something that is about to happen, or something that you may want to look out for, or something that is coming that is really a very good thing for you, or something that's a thing that you need to worry about, but not worry about, like just do something about. So I think about my own story about getting strangled when I was 17. My gut, for that 20 minutes, half an hour before that, who I thought was a friend of mine, strangled me, my gut just had this real low level of unease, if you will. It was just a kind of an uneasy feeling. There were not really any thoughts around it. In fact, I kept telling myself, oh, what are you worried about? This guy's like my older brother. He's somebody that I've, trusted my whole life. And I didn't know he was crashing on amphetamines. All I knew is when I turned my back, his hands were around my throat and I was out of there. I was just gone. I passed out immediately because he was so strong. Now, when I came back to conscious awareness, I don't know how long I was out for, my gut at that point it had gone from a low rumble to a scream. Get the hell out of there now. And I did. I opened the car door and crawled across the parking lot. But there's a way in which present moment sensation of knowing has a steadiness to it, a clarity to it, but it doesn't have that that old worry puts out. Do you understand the difference?
Yeah.
And I've asked thousands of people in my classes across the years, and everyone understand when they understand these 2 different concepts. They go, oh, right, that was that circumstance. And sometimes it can get loud enough to move you. I was just telling the story. One of my fellow authors, when I was at Esalen teaching one summer, was speaking about going to visit a friend in Manhattan. And she was sitting having tea with this friend in this window. It was like a bay window in her apartment. It was beautiful, looked over a very lovely area, and she's seated in this nice chair next to the window. The author was, and her host was sitting across from her about 5-8 feet away. And the longer she sat in this chair, the more uncomfortable she felt. And in fact, she got so uncomfortable, she began to feel like she was having a really bad indigestion. And then she started to feel like, move, get out of there, leave, go home. And it made no sense to her whatsoever. But she made an excuse to her hostess and said, God, I don't know why. I'm just feeling terrible. I've got to go home. She gets up, rushes out. Her hostess calls her 10 minutes later and says, oh my God, this construction thing came straight through the window and crushed the chair you were sitting on about 4 minutes after you left. And
wow.
everybody was in. I mean, it still makes goosebumps when I think about it. But her gut knew that something was coming that was really not good. And it kind of slowly got louder and louder and louder. It was not, by the way, the kind of charged worry. There wasn't a thought. She didn't know why she was having this sensation. But clearly her body was giving her a very loud signal eventually, and she listened to it and got up and left. Yeah.
And then really it goes back to what you were saying before too about awareness, like even the awareness of, is this worry or is this something else? Like the inquiry takes us off mute and we're starting to be in dialogue. That's fascinating.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I recently had a friend post a question on Facebook, one of those little memes with the colors, and it said, do you think it's possible that some people are born to give more love than they will ever give back in return? And a lot of people said they thought that was possible. And I responded and said that I felt like love always comes back to us eventually, maybe not on our time. But unfortunately, a lot of natural born givers aren't well versed in receiving. So when I got to your chapter on the wisdom of the heart, I was like, yeah, that validates my answer.
There you go. There you go.
Will you tell us a little bit about the distinction between the front and the back of the heart and the importance of feeling into every corner of our hearts?
Yes. So this is actually a distinction that I was noticing as I was teaching, but it took one of my inner circle to point this out to me at first, and then I began to really flesh it out and play with it. And because I noticed that most people that I knew that were caregivers, that were body workers, that really were caring human beings, were very good at sort of pouring love out the front of their heart and bathing the world around them in their love. And oftentimes feeling really good about themselves because of this love and care and all of that. But they weren't living in the back half of their heart, which I consider the deep well of the heart, the place where we refill and love ourselves. So if the front of the heart is about loving the world and caring for it, it only makes good sense to learn to love yourself, so that you can keep that deep well primed and pumping, so that you are giving to the world and receiving love until you're 99. You know, that it's just coming and going, and it's easy because you love yourself. You love yourself.
Right.
Yeah.
And it doesn't come naturally. It's really a learned skill, receiving.
Yes, it is. And most of us were trained to give, and we were really encouraged and praised for our ability to give and take care of others. So nobody ever said to us, now it's equally important for you to learn to receive love. No. And I almost would say, gosh, it's as though our giving buttons are on and flowing. Our receiving buttons, not so good, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. We have a few minutes left, and then there's so much more that I'd love to cover, and I really encourage everyone to read all the different wisdom areas because it's just fascinating the map that you provide through the whole body for connecting. But I wanted to touch quickly on the pelvis because I was at a women's circle recently. It was an Aphrodite goddess women's circle, and we talked all about the pelvic floor and doing Kegels and all of this. It was really great. And then here, great synchronicity. I'm like, wow, okay. You teach a course for women called Healing the Pelvic Floor. Reclaiming your power, sexuality, and pleasure potential, which I love.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, is that a particularly powerful area for women, and is there a connection to the divine feminine? It's kind of a big question for a short amount of time, but
come on, Kim. But let me just say, it's a huge area for women because most of what women have is internally located, and trauma to that area is undertreated. There are not a lot of modalities that actually teach us how to reclaim and be in our pelvises. And it's really almost like a black hole to many people in terms of knowing their anatomy, their physiology, what brings them pleasure, how it works. And so, yes, the divine feminine and the goddess are all just moving through that area of you when it's awakened and open. And it's very, very important that we do that. Yeah, absolutely.
That.
Absolutely.
Well, I recently started doing Kegel exercises, and it's like I have a new toy to play with. So it's an exciting area to be kind of diving into.
Absolutely. And there are many other areas that you can also use to really love yourself more deeply and have your power, be in your power as a woman. The divine feminine emanates from there and grows from there. And, I have a great little quote on page 8 in the book that I would be happy to close with. I love it. It says, your relationships with other people throughout your lifetime, your parents, spouses, children, friends, and teachers will shift as time passes and situations change. As long as you are alive, however, your body is always with you. It is so beneficial to have a strong, deep, intimate relationship with your own unique physical self. Your body is designed to guide you, keep you safe, and bring you full vitality and pleasure. There are those Kegels. It's the vehicle through which you create and manifest your thoughts and dreams into reality. In this book, you'll discover how establishing and nurturing a healthy relationship with your body will allow you to reclaim lost parts of yourself, tap into your body's wisdom, and better navigate your life. So read the book, come take a workshop from me. I have many workshops all over the world. There's one coming up at the new 1440 Multiversity outside of Santa Cruz. I got 2, a short version on Labor Day weekend and a longer version the week before. I'd love to see any of your listeners there. It's such a pleasure to teach this work and share it with people. And I've loved speaking with you, Kim. This has been great.
Thank you so much, Suzanne. For more information about Suzanne Scurlock-Durana and reclaiming your body, visit her online at fullbodypresence.com. And as always, if you enjoyed today's podcast and would take a moment to leave a 5-star rating or review on iTunes, I'd really appreciate it. Thanks so much, and I look forward to seeing you on future episodes of New World Now.
Thank you for listening to New World Now with Kim Corbin from New World Library. New World Library publishes books and audios that inspire and challenge us to improve the quality of our lives and our world. For more information about their books and authors, you can visit them online at newworldlibrary.com.